The Brad Rules!
Well, there certainly is a lot of hoopla surrounding this game. Sonic X Shadow Generations has certainly ignited the Sonic fandom. It's one of the most critically acclaimed Sonic games in quite some time. And quite frankly, I have to ask, why are people still giving a hoot what IGN has to say? Legacy video game media is pretty much dead in my eyes, and has been for quite some time. Does anyone seriously care what these fools think? I mean, honestly, with all this independent content on YouTube with perspectives from people who aren't contracted journalists, why would anyone care what the quote-unquote professionals think? So the critical acclaim means nothing to me. I've greatly enjoyed many a critically panned game, and will always continue to march to the beat of my own drum, as should all of you. It's also funny to look back on games that were panned back in the day, which are now greatly heralded by the same publications years later. So in my opinion, Sonic X Shadow Generations is great. You get 2 games for the price of one, albeit 2 very short games, and 1 game that was delisted from standalone purchasing. But 2 games with infinite replay value due to how well they're designed. So if you're the type of person that likes to think of what you're getting in terms of price, it's basically a very slightly modified OG Sonic Generations, which was $20 before its delisting, leaving the new content, Shadow Generations, with the remaining $30. I feel it's worth it, even if you're like me and you already own Sonic Generations. Because, well, that's the only way you're going to play Shadow Generations. So we'll talk about those slight adjustments to the OG Sonic Generations in a bit. But for now, let's talk about the star attraction of this package, Shadow Generations. Shadow Generations is an amalgamation of things, a concurrent continuation of Sonic Generations, a sort of sequel to Shadow the Hedgehog, and a decent-sized influence of Sonic Frontiers design and gameplay. It takes place at the same time as Sonic Generations, as Shadow is sucked into white space just as he is confronted by his old nemesis, Black Doom. You'll find yourself in a 3D open world hub world, much akin to Sonic Frontiers, where you will complete a variety of platforming challenges to access new levels, complete challenge acts, which are just like in Sonic Generations, which are a remixed version of the main levels with specific tasks for you to complete. And you'll also take on time challenges that will have you racing across white space collecting rings and clocks, and some of these have razor sharp time limits that will really put your speed to the test. You'll also find a huge amount of chests as well that hold unlockable content for the collection room, such as artwork and music. You'll also find parts spread across white space, which you can bring back to Q-Bot and Orbot for their rocket. This hub world is very well designed and quite a blast to run around in, and it's really majestic looking, and calling it a hub world is sort of doing it a disservice, because hub worlds can be very limited, but in essence, that is what it is. But it's definitely the best designed one I've seen from a gameplay perspective, especially since Sonic Generations Hub World is pretty much a glorified level select menu. It's still well done, but very limited, and Shadow Generations Hub World is not limited in the slightest. There's plenty to do, explore, and discover here. Sonic Team definitely did a good job of keeping us busy outside playing through the levels. Now you'll notice that the controls feel very different, and that's because we have another amalgamation on our hands in terms of gameplay, and that's the combination of Sonic Generations and Sonic Frontiers controls. Shadow's startup speed can feel very jarring the first time you play this. If you're not boosting, you feel it. And while this was felt in the OG release of Sonic Generations, it's even more noticeable here. And I like this actually. It really gives weight to Shadow and his movements, and gives us probably the most accurate control of any 3D Sonic game. Yeah, I said it. You get the insane speed of the boost, but also the more refined sense of physics from the 2D titles by incorporating movement from Sonic Frontiers. I'll be honest, I found myself jamming the control stick forward when I was all out of boost to move as quickly as possible, because this game really wants you to go fast and have the thrill ride of your life. It's also nice that if you don't like this added precision with the control scheme, you can alter it back to the OG Sonic Generation controls, which is a nice addition for customizing your experience. On top of all this, Shadow gets to use Chaos Control by filling up a gauge by defeating enemies, and this lets you freeze time, which is very useful for navigating hazards and easily defeating enemies. Rings fill up your boost meter, and I'm pleased to say lives continue to be a thing of the past. As cool as Chaos Control is, that's not the only power Shadow has at his disposal, because as you progress in the game, Shadow will acquire Doom powers, and I have to say all of these are very creative and interestingly implemented, from Shadow hanging 10 with the Doom Surf to him taking flight with the Doom Wing. There's even an interesting re-implementation of Shadow's classic weapon from Sonic Adventure 2, the Chaos Spear, which is the Doom Spear, which allows you to target up to 5 enemies or objects and let her rip. You'll also have access to this grapple ability with the Doom Warp, which sees some really intuitive platforming gameplay centered around it. Finally, you have the Doom Blast, which lets Shadow launch Black Doom's henchmen with a powerful kick that can break objects and defeat other enemies, and then Shadow will warp to wherever they end up. Now, getting around to levels, we've got overall less here than Shadow Generations, but they're definitely longer in length overall, and progression is still set up very similarly to Sonic Generations. You'll complete 2 acts of a level, then be presented with the challenge acts, which you get for each, and you must complete both, unlike in Sonic Generations where you only had to do 1 per level. But honestly, you should be playing these because they are fun and well designed, and while they're not quite as good as the ones we got in Sonic Generations, and there's far less, they're still good overall. It's just that the concepts are not nearly as creative as Sonic Generations challenge acts. So we got Space Colony Arc from Sonic Adventure 2, and Shadow the Hedgehog, Rail Canyon from Sonic Heroes, Kingdom Valley from Sonic 06, Sunset Heights from Sonic Forces, Chaos Island from Sonic Frontiers, and Radical Highway from Sonic Adventure 2. Also, there is a Tokyo level from the Sonic 3 movie that will be released in December for those who purchased the digital deluxe version of the game, and it looks pretty damn stylish. So these choices are definitely interesting, and I'm happy to report that they're all great levels, and they truly encapsulate fantastic design, and they're all superior to their originals. I see a lot of people complaining that they didn't put any levels from Shadow the Hedgehog in the game, and even though I'm sure Space Colony Arc is mainly the version from Sonic Adventure 2, there are elements from the Shadow game, so consider it partial representation of sorts. Also, it's a little confusing as to why Chaos Island is here. Although a great level with great calming music, why out of 6 levels about a game about Shadow the Hedgehog did they choose a level from a game that he's not even in out of all the games he's been featured? I mean, it's cool that they wanted to represent a newer game in the lineup, but it's just a little out of place in a game about Shadow. Solely about Shadow, in fact, and they feature a level that has 0 significance to Shadow. It's hard to knock a level that I actually like, it just feels a little disjointed. But then again, if we're truly being logical here from a story and continuity perspective, Sunset Heights shouldn't be featured either, considering Shadow Generations' story runs congruently with Sonic Generations, which takes place before Sonic Forces, but at least you could say it was in Shadow's future, and it would still make sense considering that the Time Eater is manipulating time and space, so who's to say Shadow couldn't be transported to the future? It's just that Sonic Generations set the premise that Sonic is exploring places from his past, so do you expect the same from Shadow Generations? It would be like if Sonic Generations had a level from Knuckles Chaotix. I really do love these stages, they're aesthetically pleasing, with many of these stages getting major graphical updates while still maintaining what made them look so appealing in the first place. And I think Sonic Team did a really good job building off the designs of the original stages by mixing together a great sense of speed, platforming, and mix in the Doom powers, and you've got some really exciting gameplay here that make these stages so easy to love. I also really love how in certain stages Doom transports you to Radical Highway, where the environment is really warped and trippy before dumping you back into the original stage. Sonic Generations never loses sight of its villain and story, and I simply love that. Also hidden throughout the stages are the keys to the chest I mentioned earlier, with different keys being able to access different chests, and you'll have a much tougher ranking system on your hands this time than what was in Sonic Generations. I also really love the boss picks here, and they all make sense. We've got the Bio-Lizard, Metal Overlord, Mephiles, and Devil Doom, and all these fights are great and building on their previous iterations. I really enjoyed the Metal Overlord fight, and it was really cool to finally fight him without being in a super form and using the Doom Surf to do battle with him on the water, and the Devil Doom fight does a good job of implementing platforming elements, making for a really nuanced fight. All in all, I love the boss battles. And can we talk about this remix music? Holy shit, I absolutely love the remix of Radical Highway's music, Vengeance is Mine, and how they jacked it all up to 11 with that one. Also, Rail Canyon Act 2's music in Sonic Heroes has to be one of my favorite Sonic tunes of all time, and while this remix isn't quite on par with that rockin' ass piece of music, the remix we have here in Shadow Generations is a really awesome remix nevertheless that takes electronic elements of the original and builds on that, making for a memorable track in its own right. Plus, the decision to go with a melancholy orchestral version of All Hail Shadow for the white space music was absolutely brilliant. The perfect way to set the mood. Seeing Shadow interact with Maria and Gerald one last time is pretty heart-wrenching. I'm not ashamed to admit the game got me right in the feels with its final cutscene. From the music to the dialogue to the animations, everything is presented so well. You can't help but just be pulled in. As a matter of fact, these are some of the best animated and polished looking cutscenes the Sonic franchise has ever seen. There's no humor to be had here, and no Baldy McNose hair quips to be found. Shadow and this game are all business, giving us the Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06 vibe. It's dark, foreboding, and stylish, and it's a winning combination. And as a little side note before I wrap up talking about the Sonic Generations half of this package, if you purchase the digital deluxe version of this game, you'll be able to play as Terios. And who is this, may you ask? Well, this was the original name and design of Shadow before ultimately becoming Shadow in Sonic Adventure 2. So that's cool to see that this design actually gets to be featured in an official Sonic game. So, Shadow Generations is a fantastic good time, but what about Sonic Generations? Well, this is a remaster, so to speak, but I really have to be honest. Graphically, I'm not seeing any truly noticeable visual improvements. The remaster is slightly, and I do mean slightly, a bit sharper, ever so slightly, mind you, and classic Sonic's appearance has been altered to match his Superstar's appearance, which I actually found out after playing this. It's not noticeable at all. I'm not a brilliant quillologist like a lot of the Sonic fandom nutcases out there. The other differences are more noticeable, and in terms of gameplay, both classic and modern Sonic get the drop dash, and modern Sonic gets the Sonic Frontier style of movement just like Shadow does, but it can be changed back in the options menu to the OG controls. Some other notables are collecting 3 Chow in each act of each zone, and when you do, they'll hang out at the entrance to the level's hub worlds. It's purely cosmetic, but it's something, I guess. Everything else resides in the cutscenes. One thing I never understood in the original game was why the opening and closing cutscenes were always so grainy, but thankfully those have been fixed up, along with some slight alterations to the animation and some pretty massive changes to the dialogue, with every line of dialogue being re-recorded. Some of the old lines are still in, but mostly everything has been changed. Some of these changes are good, like what I addressed in my review of Sonic Generations regarding Sonic and Tails looking like morons not recognizing Green Hill Zone and Chemical Plant Zone. I never understood that at all. But luckily it's been rectified. But then you get moments like Knuckles asking classic Sonic where the rest of his island is, and Sonic looks at his stomach because in the OG version he asks him if he put on some weight. So the animation wasn't even changed to accommodate the dialogue. Wow, nice one guys. Sorry, but considering how low effort this quote-unquote remaster is, there's no excuse for this. And it's not an oversight because it's a cutscene in the main game. A cutscene they specifically re-recorded dialogue for, no less. The other thing I need to address is why the hell they took the hilarious scene out where Sonic is face-palming Amy to keep her away, and legions of goofs have been defending this, saying it's a way of keeping Amy's character consistent with her new characterization, even though this game is fucking 13 years old. Try to question it, and they say you're trying to be anti-woke. Well, call me what you want, but why did this scene have to be reanimated with the single best joke in the entire game being forever deleted? It just seems like artistic degradation. Instead of having a comical, playful scene, Amy is left holding a cupcake instead, completely making her just another attendee at Sonic's birthday party. So yeah, great job with that recharacterization. She went from being a key character in a scene, which was quite funny, to being just another face in the crowd at the party. So let's be honest with ourselves, say it with me now, this change was made because Amy is a female character, and they didn't want Sonic doing something physical to Amy. Fans in the past have complained about this scene, and if you take a look on X, you'll see just how triggered and socially political certain Sonic fans can get. It's pretty obvious Sonic Team and Sega didn't want the smoke and changed it to save face to avoid hearing endless screeching from the easily offended peanut gallery. I'll finish off by talking about the digital deluxe version Sonic Adventure skin for modern Sonic, which is so cool to use for a change of pace. And this is a really nice extra. And if you signed up for the Sonic the Hedgehog newsletter by November 1st, you got a free code that let you download the Sonic Jam skin to swap out for classic Sonic. And this is pretty awesome. I don't think many people are even familiar with this design for Sonic that was featured in what's a pretty forgotten Sonic compilation on the Sega Saturn, where Sonic ran around in a 3D environment for the first time in a little feature called Sonic World. So it's pretty cool to see this low poly model of Sonic receive some love. If you missed out on the newsletter opportunity, you can still download the skin for $149 on Steam, which isn't bad at all. Too bad that when you transform into Supersonic with either skin, they just use their original models, and this is the same for cutscenes as you probably would have guessed. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with my purchase of Sonic X Shadow Generations, and if you haven't played Sonic Generations ever, this is beyond a must-buy, because these are two amazing games that anyone who remotely likes Sonic will get a lot of enjoyment out of. Sonic Generations was already one of my favorite Sonic games of all time, and with Shadow Generations being added into the package, we've got something truly special here, so it gets a wholehearted recommendation, to put it mildly. So guys, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Have you played Sonic X Shadow Generations? What do you think of the remaster? And what do you think of Shadow Generations? Which one do you think is superior? If I had to pick, I'd still go with the OG Sonic Generations. That one just holds a special place in my heart. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bells to get all notifications when I post all my new videos. Any donations that you can give on Patreon would be greatly appreciated. And hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Hit the thumbs down if you fucking hated it. And thank you all for watching, guys. And I'll see you next time.